I'm Greg DeRocher, and this is Chamber Web TV, focusing on election 2018 and the candidates from both Cambridge and Kitchener South Hespeler. Here in our studio today is the candidate for the Liberal Party from the riding of Cambridge, Kathryn McGarry. Kathryn, wonderful to see you.
Good to see you again, Greg.
You get right out of the hot seat in question period at Queen's Park on, Tuesday, and the writ drops. We're all going. Everybody's popping up their signs all over the place.
Yeah, switch from the high heels to the running shoes.
Is this an exciting time for you?
It is.
You love campaigning?
I love campaigning, Greg, because for me, getting to the door is the best part of the campaign. To me, it's a job interview every time I go into it, and you never know what's on the other side of the door, and that to me is a challenge and part of the excitement.
You know what is funny to me is I talk to people and people say, oh yeah, I never hear from my politicians until it's election time. And I say, well, wait a minute.
Yeah.
Once they get elected, they then have a job to perform. So they're either in Ottawa or Queen's Park or at City Hall, wherever it happens to be, they're working on your behalf all the time. It's very difficult for them to, and they all do, but it's very difficult for them to go out and bang on doors all the time to make sure that they're sitting down and talking with their constituents. But I said, I know they do. Their plates are full. They're 12-hour days, generally 7 days a week.
That's a slight day for me.
Yeah, exactly. And then if you have a ministerial portfolio like you've had for the last few years, it's even bigger, because it might not just be in Cambridge or in Toronto, might be anywhere in the province. But it is interesting, and I know I talk to a lot of politicians, and they say they love campaign time because it does give them that, I guess, right to be in the community, talking to the people.
And it is true, Greg, and sometimes people say, well, I've never heard from you, and I said, well, did you answer the door the last time I knocked? Because I never did stop door to door, and that's what community is all about.
Yeah.
You know, I show up to everything I can. I am often told that I'm everywhere. How do I do that? That's when you're speaking to people, maybe not at their doors, but in the events, in their community, in the things that we're invited to as politicians. But overall, I just really love talking to the people of Cambridge and North Dumfries Township, and have continued to serve as best I can in that capacity.
And I know because we're friends on Facebook, I know you're everywhere, because you always pop up. You're here, you're there.
And in fact, I only post half the stuff.
Yeah, and you know what? In fact, the other day it was interesting, because I was saying to my wife, I said, you know what? There were 2 back-to-back posts from Kathryn on my feed. And she was in 2 different places, one side of the city to the other side of the city. And they were like 51 minutes apart. And I'm thinking, how does anyone juggle that? You know, because you're hopping out of a car, you know, meeting people, talking to people, jumping back in the car, going to another event, and it's grueling.
It can be, and you have to have long stamina, and I often say that my time as a nurse and doing shift work really groomed me for the job, but I routinely do 18 to 20-hour days, because when I'm back either home or in my condo at night, I'm doing a briefing for the next day, and of course with a ministry job, no more hours come with the ministry job, so you have to actually take that out of sleep time. So, as I said, I'm a routine 18 to 20 hours. By the way, you and Lisa were not home the night I knocked on your door.
Oh, we were not. Ago. No, we might not have been.
No?
We were the last election around.
Yes,
because
you were,
I
but
remember.
This time, no. I left a card on your.
Oh, yes, and we always like those conversations. But the only problem is we know each other so well. We'll probably come in and take you away from campaigning and have a coffee or something like that.
It's true.
Anyway, let's get down to our questions. The Ontario Chamber, as you well know, because you're very involved with Rocco Rossi and the Ontario Chamber and a lot of the individuals that work for them. But we've come up with a program that hits 4 pillars of importance from a business perspective. It's under the banner of Vote Prosperity. And I want to cover some of those. The 4 pillars are strengthening business competitiveness, fostering job creation, building healthy communities, and improving government accountability. It kind of goes right across the spectrum of things. And I think
it does that.
The chamber world is now thinking, you know, we've long sat back and said, let other people take up the banners of issues in their community, because they didn't seem to be business issues. But we're now, really understanding clearly that, everything that happens in your community, you can draw a straight line to business prosperity and
Yep.
people prosperity, because that's what
Yes.
it's all about.
And that's a key, and that's really supporting people so they can be A, working, and B, working productively. And that's exactly where I think the Ontario Chamber's focus is a great one. I recently sat down with them a few weeks ago as Minister of Transportation and had a roundtable for a couple of hours with the Ontario Chamber. And I'm really glad to see some of the programs in there. As we know, mental health affects so many sectors. The fact that the Chamber is now recognizing that unless you support people, the business does not grow.
Exactly.
So well done.
Yeah,
I
well,
like that. I like the.
Yeah,
new
we
focus.
kind of we're kind of you know what, it was like, it was hard for 40 years. We sat.
Yeah.
I say clearly we were the snowflakes on the top of the fence post. We had the activists on one side and the advocates on the other side, and if it didn't meet business interests, we sat in a post. And I think more and more what we're understanding is everything is related to the prosperity, wealth, and vibrancy of your community, and that's business connectivity. So
Absolutely
we need to
it
be
is.
part of all of the solutions that happen in our communities' lives. But let's talk a little bit about the electricity file, because that's probably one of the biggest things on a lot of people's mind, but also on business minds. And I think most people well know where you and your government have gone with the electricity file, with the Green Energy Act. Where are we going from here? Because we have really high-priced electricity. We sell off some of our surplus electricity, and what the Ontario Chamber is kind of thinking is, why isn't there a possibility for businesses, if they're equipped, to be able to buy some of that surplus power that we're either giving away or selling at a reduced rate, and be able to buy it or get it for the exact same rate as we'd be selling it to someone else?
So as you know, Greg, the electricity file, when we came into office in 2003, was a couple of months past that August 2003 time when the lights went out and the grid went out across North America. At that time, we were looking at up to 53 days summer in smog days. We were looking at record numbers of people coming into the emergency departments where I worked on smog days with respiratory illnesses, and sometimes not enough equipment to manage them in the emerge departments. It was a time where there were brownouts. Manufacturers that depended on clean, efficient electricity to make their product were finding that I'll give you an example, a steel industry, if they got a brownout in the midst of trying to heat up their batch to do whatever they were going to do with that, they would lose the whole table if they had a 30 to 60 second brownout. And the same with Canadian General Tower. When I went in to visit them a while back, when they have electricity out for a while and they don't have a generator, they have to make sure that they scrape all the molten vinyl off their equipment to make sure that they can carry on. So we were at a time where we had to make a decision as a government. Under successive governments of all stripes, nobody had invested in our electricity system. We promised the province of Ontario that we would stop burning coal. That was the biggest single climate change initiative we could do, and the single biggest thing we could do to clean up our air and to help all those suffering from lung health issues. 1 in 5 people, Greg, suffer from lung health issues here in the province. And if you think that into Cambridge, that's almost 25,000 people.
Yeah.
So we came in and we had to spend billions and billions and billions of dollars to replace 75% of our infrastructure, including the wires, the distribution session. We had to ensure that we would never again have the issues that happened in the 03 brownout. I know if the Northeast United States went out right now, it would stop at Ontario. We'd be able to continue with our own grid.
Yeah.
We also recognize that we had to take a long-term energy plan approach so that we weren't thinking 4 years in advance, we were thinking 20 years out, because a lot of these big electricity generators take a long time to rebuild or to plan for. Bottom line is we spent billions, and now we have 50 to 60% of our power coming from nuclear, which is emissions free. We stopped burning coal in 2014. We've had no smog days since, and we're saving $4 billion a year on healthcare costs. That $4 billion isn't a line item. It's, you know, my son, your daughter, his aunt, the people of Ontario, and we have made sure that we have a 23% reduction in emerge visits from people suffering from the inability to breathe properly. So we've done that system. In the meantime, we've made sure that our base load power is set from now to 2064 to refurbish Darlington and the Bruce Power plants. And in the meantime, because it's hard to change the level of a nuclear facility to accommodate peaks and valleys in the day-to-day fluctuations in the market. So the Green Energy Act has made sure our renewables, wind, solar, and our gas plants will help to generate some of the other the peaks and valleys. And we continue making sure that our 24% of hydro is also part of the mix. So we have a good mix. If there's an app called, and I'll think of it in a minute, GridWatch. And on GridWatch, you can see every hour what power Ontario's using, which of the sectors is producing what amount of power, what your net export is, and what your net import is, because we're still importing some of the power. Overall, yes, we've had an excess of power and we receive a net benefit when we do sell it off. We have a net benefit, I think, of something like $600 million last year, for instance. We have an agreement with Quebec right now so that we have a $170 million deal that we signed. So when Quebec is low in power, we can provide it to them. When we have peak power needs, which is in our summer, and Quebec's low, they provide to us. That's taken costs out of the system. We know it was expensive to rebuild our system, but we had no choice to do it. But we continue to take costs out of the system. Right now, with the excess of power, it's usually generated at night and usually from the nuclear plants. And as we build out things like the electric vehicle charging stations, and we are now electrifying ferries, and our GO Regional Express Rail, we will need more electricity. The other thing I might add is that there's a lot of innovation right now to produce products such as battery packs that will store huge amounts of energy so that we can now use those to power our electric vehicle charging stations and other battery pack areas. There's a lot of innovation in the field. I cannot believe we just purchased 2 electric ferries to go between Kingston and Wolfe Island. Electric ferries.
I know.
Like, who
Very
knew?
cool.
So in that mix, Greg, yes, we're getting a net benefit each year as we sell off our power. But every day on GridWatch, and I know you'd love the app.
I'm going to download it
Yes,
after
it's a
this
free
interview.
app. I know you are, and I'll show it to you afterwards. But the app shows you where that power is coming from. Our system here in Ontario is world class, and we have jurisdictions from around the world coming to study how we've decarbonized our electricity system, and we're saving people's lives and saving significantly on our healthcare costs, and also how are we producing enough power for the manufacturers that need them. We know that we needed less than our long-term energy plan first identified before the 2008 global recession. And we didn't need as much for some of the manufacturers at the time, but our need is continuing to build up. The last thing I might say about refurbishing the Bruce Power and the Darlington plants is as we're taking those reactors offline, we have to have that power to continue to provide the base load of power. So as we're now in that refurbishment phase, we will have the power to accommodate when that reactor comes off. And you can't take those reactors offline unless you have the power to back that up. And we're there.
So Darlington is a go.
Darlington is, and so is Bruce Power. Darlington right now is 90 days ahead of schedule. They're on time and they're actually ahead of time and on budget. The same with Bruce Power. Now, right here in Cambridge, what a great story for business. You were there or heard about the recent another
BWXT,
announcement for
yeah.
BWXT. So proud of this company,
Yeah.
Greg.
They're fantastic. They're
This
just
is-
a great company.
Yeah, $642 million contract, the largest ever.
Mm-hmm.
And in November 2014, when they got the master servicing agreement with Bruce Power, that was a
Mm-hmm.
$300 million contract. The people at BWXT have enough work now until they're finished and retired and their kids are finished and
Yeah,
retired.
yeah, isn't that amazing when you
That-
think about that?
That's a foundational company, and you
Yeah.
know, again, over 170 years right
Yeah.
now. But right here in Cambridge, we have at a center of excellence for nuclear supply, and the nuclear supply chain, not only in Ontario but worldwide, really looks to Ontario for our nuclear engineers, for our nuclear supply chain. The center of it is in Cambridge, but the nuclear supply chain is Ontario-wide. We are seeing, if you ever see a map populated with everybody that is supplying the nuclear business, we have good paying jobs in many parts of Ontario. And also, the nice thing that we are very pleased about with Bruce Power is that they took over the contract to do nuclear medical isotopes and the nuclear medicine piece of what was done at Chalk River that are now closing their
Yes.
doors. So that's, again, more innovation. They have partnered with many businesses in Ontario to provide that. So when you look at our energy supply system, we now have a clean energy system that has made it easier for us to breathe in Ontario, which is huge.
Mm-hmm.
We have a clean energy system that doesn't have brownouts and blackouts, and so our manufacturers can rely on that electricity. And we have done this with almost 0% interest with yesterday's money, and we have the power for tomorrow. In all the surrounding jurisdictions in the states right now who are at the end of their life cycles with coal, end of the life cycles with their distribution lines, they haven't made the investments necessary to carry on, and those jurisdictions already have higher price power than we do here in Ontario. It is a myth that we have the highest hydro rates that I keep hearing from the Conservatives in particular. It's a myth. We're about middle of the pack, and you can see that on the charts that are there.
So then why did we borrow money to reduce hydro rates? If we're in the middle and we've done all of these good things, and the probability is our surplus right now of what we have will probably be consumed because we're going to electrify things more, cars or
And
electric
change out
cars.
the nuclear.
Yeah, and exactly.
Generators, yeah.
But we'll probably in the next 20 years, because electric cars, you know, we're all standing in line waiting for electric cars to be
120%
you know, I can't
increase
wait
last
to-
year in the
I know, I
sale,
can't
yeah.
wait to get one myself, but, you know, as they come on stream, it's going to consume way more power. So probably in 20 years, you know, we're going to consume all of the surplus power that we have now with existing needs, which is really good. We're going forward with the rehabilitation of our nuclear plants for sure. But you know, I guess my question is, why do we borrow money to put it on the backs of our kids and grandchildren? Because that's, in essence, what we're ending up doing. When reality is, maybe our hydro rates weren't that far out of whack, if what you're saying is correct.
And it is correct. But here's what the Fair Hydro Plan does, which was passed in the legislature in the last year. It's very similar to a mortgage. We now have a $70 billion asset in our electricity system here in Ontario, which is huge. And it's very similar to a mortgage. It was unfair for just one generation to pay for all of the upgrading that we needed to do on this system, and we have a $70 billion asset. So much like your mortgage, we extended the rate of that mortgage, if you will, for hydro over the life of the asset. And that's simply all we did. And that we heard from Ontarians that right now electricity is too high, we need it reduced. We listened to that and extended the payments out over the life of the asset, the same, Greg, as you would do with a home. Most mortgages are not 2 or 3 or 5 years.
Yeah.
Most mortgages are extended over 25 years. That's what we've done. We have an asset here that not just we are benefiting from, but our children and grandchildren will be benefiting from. So that's really what it is.
Good explanation on it. Not quite sure you've sold me, but good explanation on it.
What is important here for Cambridge is the good paying jobs that we have right here
Yeah.
in on
Well, and that,
for
you know,
the
like,
electricity system.
you know, the reality of it is sometimes, you know, you hate to argue against it when there are great jobs being created in our community.
And
around
people
it.
are breathing better, and our healthcare costs are down. And we have also recognized this, and we have a number of different programs that are helping businesses with the Green On and the energy efficient programs that we have. Companies are far more efficient. I just had a tour of the hospital, all LED lights that they will never have to replace.
All LED lights in our studio here.
Yep. So all good things.
That's why it's not so burning hot as it
I
usually.
have noticed. Yes, I know.
Bill 148, as you well know, was created a lot of anxiety for business. But I think as a member of the government, I want you to clearly understand that business was not saying that $15 an hour was unfair. What they were saying is ramping it up over 14, 18 months was unfair to them to be able to do their business planning as well. However, the vast majority of businesses pay more than $15 an hour, and it wasn't going to really impact them dramatically. The other 172 regulations that came with Bill 148 are having the exact same impact as the $15 an hour. So, you know, it's a double whammy from their perspective. And I think from their perspective, they're saying, you know, it's not that all of this was bad. There's some of it. Quite clearly, business would never wrap their head around and would never agree to in Bill 148. But for the vast majority of them, they say they don't have any issues with the fact that they should be included in the Employment Standards Act or the Labor Relations Act. It's just the timing of it was far too rapid for them to be able to adjust their entire business plan. It's akin to having someone say in opposition to the Conservatives' platform of saying we can reduce government expenditures by 4 or 6%, and the government coming back and saying you're not going to be able to do that without cuts. It's akin to that exact same thing to business saying a 32% increase in input costs for your business, and don't tell me you have to make cuts. Absolutely, business has to make cuts. It's a big hit for them. What are the government's plans, if you're reelected, to go forward on Bill 148 and make sure that the accommodations are made to ensure that people don't lose their jobs, that businesses don't go out of business? What are you going to do?
So, Greg, we know that right now businesses are posting record profits. The Ontario province is leading the G7 and Canada in economic growth. Our economy is strong and it's growing. We are also at record unemployment levels here in Cambridge. Our level is even below the province, which is below the federal average for the last 35 straight months. So we knew that many people working full-time were paying almost 100% of their salary on rent or other things and weren't managing themselves. And us, the taxpayer, we the taxpayers have to pick up those extra costs. And we knew the time was right to make sure that people are paid fairly so they can look after themselves and their families, because when they can't, you see the consequences each and every day. So we know that the $14 minimum wage was difficult for companies to do. We also knew that in other jurisdictions that went to more of a living wage, that they didn't have the job losses that they predicted, that they had a very small minor bump in inflation rate, and overall they were hiring in the next year because that extra money that the low-income earners, the minimum wage earners are being paid goes back into the local economy that week. These are folks that are not going on European vacations. They are buying better food for themselves, shoes for the kids, maybe better rent. So that was an important thing to do. We also knew that we needed to assist business, in particular small business, in stepping forward with a package that would assist that. We have reduced small business tax rates by 22% in the last while. We made sure that we reduced that further. We've put a package together to assist the nonprofits to accommodate the higher wages that have come out through there. And we're continuing to work with businesses around the holiday pay, which did not work for people. We've asked for a consultation now, so we're in that process of setting up that consultation to get this right. We've put a moratorium on what's happened there, and we'll make sure that we get that piece right in the near future.
That's a really important one. I had one of my members call me and say that his accountant came forward with the checks for holiday pay for Family Day. And one of his employees actually was getting $800 for Family Day. And it was all based on the formula that, it's an operation that had an umbrella operation, and this employee was actually charged with working 3 or 4 hours a week at the different satellite organizations, and those satellite organizations were paying that position. And so it actually, under CRA rules, was that individual was contracted to them. So they were basically part-time worker for 10 different organizations. And the individual holiday pay calculation accumulated up to $800.
And we heard that loudly and clearly, and that was an unintended consequence. So we've put a moratorium on the holiday pay right now and set up the consultation group to get that piece right.
Do you think there's other there's another one that comes in January the 1st, 2019? With respects to canceling a shift or scheduling overtime. Maybe the scheduling overtime isn't quite as critical. I think it's 96 hours or something like that when it comes in. The 48 hours notice for canceling a shift is going to prove to be a little bit disconcerting for businesses that are weather related.
And we've made those exemptions in
up
some
until
of them.
January.
Yeah, so we're continuing to look at what other businesses or weather related activities that are being undertaken by whatever organization it is, making sure that there will be a sector specific
I think
exemption
it
from
probably
there.
needs to be, because if you're a construction
So we're evaluating
worker,
that. Yeah, exactly. So we understand that.
Yeah.
Agriculture would be another.
Car washes.
Car washes, other certainly with my job as a Minister of Natural Resources and Forestry, I had 339 provincial parks under my watch, and that made a difference with some of our
forestry
workers.
people and that kind of stuff.
Exactly. So it's one of the reasons we've put an exemption in for this amount of time so that we can keep evaluating and working with those that feel they need that exemption to continue. So that work continues on that in a regulatory sense, and regulations, as you know, take a long time to do.
To fetter out,
Yep, and we do a lot of consultation. I know we were talking earlier whether regulations, why don't we have third-party individuals looking in, and we already do. And that's what the public consultation is with any regulatory or legislative change. And usually whatever ministry is making a reg or a legislative change, we do a jurisdictional scan. Our ministries do that, and they make sure that some of the independents are having a look at it as well, just depending on what it is. And that's what the public consultation period is. It's not just individuals coming to speak to the committee when it goes to legislative committee. It's all of the written and other forms of communications for a particular change, whether it's a regulation or a legislative change in that area.
Well, that's good. I know Carl Baldoff from the Ontario Chamber of Commerce is meeting regularly with ministries and talking about some of these irregularities in the regulations that we need to. And regulation changes are totally different from legislative changes. I think people don't understand that. Once the legislation gets passed, then the regulations get built around it.
Yeah,
and those
it's
can
more
be,
of an overarching
and those can be
legislative
changed
frame.
by a minister, they don't have to go back to the House to change it. Those can be changed and addressed through the ministry.
And through the ministry and through the committee process.
Yes,
Right? If I had that stroke of a pen that I could do anything I wanted
Yeah,
as a
I guess
minister,
I guess that'd be just a tad dictatorial, but
It would be,
We'd
and
have
so
go.
that's why-
We'd have go.
It's that or a magic wand. Yes, I know. I think every politician wishes that they had a magic wand. But through that regulatory process change, and I sat on the Legislation and Regulations Committee, and actually I was vice chair of that, and I know that that process undergoes quite a lot of rigor.
Yeah.
But when you're making a legislative umbrella and framework, and the devil is in the detail
Yeah.
with any regulations. That's what takes the time, and that's the consultation process. And sometimes it still needs to be refined and evaluated
Yep.
and then re-refined, because it's the businesses in the province that tell us what they need. The
Yeah.
holiday pay is a certain, is a
Yeah.
good example. Whoops,
Yeah.
this is a, this is an unintended consequence, so let's go back to the
Yeah.
table, back to the drawing board.
Yeah.
And let's,
And we always have
get-
the
and
ability
that's
to
what
be,
we're doing.
and government always has the ability to be able to do that.
And that's my job as your
Yeah.
MPP.
Exactly.
You know, I've taken a lot of comments over the 4 years I've been in on whatever subject it is, and it's my role to take it back and say, what about this? What about that? Boy, can we refine this to make it better for that sector or that business or that individual or that committee or that organization?
Yeah.
That's really what the role of the MPP is to
Sure.
do.
Sure. Fostering job creation. What do you think about the fact that we now have to pay $100 an hour for a plumber? We don't have enough plumbers. How are we going to create an education system, particularly a education system, a post-secondary education system, that's going to address businesses' needs? And, you mentioned earlier about the fact that we've got low unemployment. It's very difficult to find skilled labor today.
Yes, it is.
The federal government still hasn't got the immigration thing quite right yet, so that businesses can, start to look abroad and bring in talented people. It's okay, but it's not perfect yet. So we've got an opportunity here to make sure that we are training the skilled people in our own community. Is there anything more we can do to the system to make it more vibrant like that, to encourage people to take it on, but to make the apprentice system more tolerable for individuals and companies that are looking for apprentice?
And Greg, that's you bring up a great point. It's a very complex subject, trying to find more skilled laborers, and more complex than you'd think. When I am meeting with businesses and manufacturers here in Cambridge and North Dumfries Township, they tell me that some of their greatest need, and you hear this all the time, they need more highly skilled tradespeople in the business. And so we have taken a very broad approach on how to ensure that there are more young people or those looking for second careers can actually accept and go into a skilled trade. That's where many of the jobs are, and it's a good paying profession for long term.
Sure is, yeah.
So we've actually renamed our Ministry of Training Colleges and Universities to our Advanced Education and Skills Development Ministry. We work very closely with community colleges, with universities, with school boards, with parents, with businesses, to try and encourage more young people in particular to think of a trade as a long-term, wonderful career, because there are very many that have good, stable careers, whether they're working for a company or entrepreneurial in spirit. They have gone out on their own to create their own plumbing business, for instance, or whatever else. There's a couple of things that I would note. Number one, until fairly recently, many of our guidance counselors were guiding students in high school into, a university or a college education, and some of the job fairs, for instance, did not include skilled trades. So, and each school board has behaved differently across the province with that. And now I think they are recognizing they need to be far more broad-based. Number two is parents. There are many parents out there that has a child that shows a lot of aptitude for a skilled trade, and the child's interested in it. They've done well in whatever class that they've been doing. These are the kids that are looking at car magazines and want to be in the shop and want to do this, where the family's not necessarily helping to support that job choice, and they've tried to steer them
Well, we all
into
want
this.
doctors, lawyers, and accountants.
Sure.
Right?
Sure. But
It's our own fault. It's
But-
bad parenting.
you need, well, we have to, and as I said, this is the broad-based approach to
Sure.
really get everybody on board, that everybody needs a good paying job and something that they enjoy, but those doctors and lawyers have to get to somewhere and
Yeah.
be in a building that needs a
Absolutely.
trade to build it and build the transit option or the
And
car
I don't
that they're
want them to
doing.
be good plumbers. I want them to be good fixers of me. You know, if I go in to see a doctor,
Yes.
I don't care if he's a good handyman. I want to care that he's a good doctor. So
Yes.
concentrate on that, and we'll try and figure out how to get you the plumber and the electrician to come and fix your stuff. But I
That's
think a
true.
number of years ago, we went to school board and said, can we get in on your grade 8 days where the high schools bring in and oh, what do you want to do? Well, we just want to stand up and make a presentation because we know parents are there.
Yes.
And to say, you know what? If your son or daughter wants to be a plumber or a electrician or a tradesperson of any other sort, that's okay. Encourage them to do that. If they're the type of child that likes to work with their hands and likes to be, you know, encourage them to look in that direction. You know, we need doctors, we need lawyers, we need accountants, we need all of those, but not everybody's going to be one. And recognize that, and just remember that that is a viable long-term career that your child will never look back on and say, I made the wrong choice. There's lots of plumbers and electricians out there that have done very, very well for themselves. The school board just, well, that's not really our job. Our job is to teach children how to make a decision. And I said, well, yeah, I've had a few of my own children, and when they get to that stage of graduating from high school, they still can't make a choice.
Yeah, and they need the information early, and you bring
Yeah.
up a good point, and it's one of the reasons why we have revamped the ministry itself, but started earlier to try and get this forward. We have really accelerated our apprenticeship programs.
Yeah.
We have more possibilities for apprenticeships in Ontario than we ever have, and we continue to provide good jobs. Our spending in infrastructure right now is historic, and we need the construction workers.
Yeah, I
We
was going
need
to
all
say,
those
you're not going to be
drywallers
able to
and
spend a nickel
carpenters.
of it if you can't get the skilled people that are going
No.
to be needed.
And
So,
with our Southwestern Ontario Development Fund,
Mm-hmm.
we have seen investment here in Cambridge of $80 million
Mm-hmm.
to area businesses such as Toyota, such as Unilock, such as
Mm-hmm.
Bendall, and a number of other companies here. And they get that grant while they're doing major expansions. So they're expanding either their property and all the equipment that goes into it, but they also need to add employees to their
Yeah.
mix. So we've retained and added about 10,700 jobs
Yeah.
here in Cambridge right now. And many of those companies with expansion need the skilled trades to
Yeah.
build the area that they can actually put the machinery in if they're manufacturers and to continue to grow that business and the job.
Yeah.
So it does work together. We have a number of different programs in place. The youth job strategy, for instance, the youth entrepreneurial program helps those individuals to either start an IT company or go into a trade, help with purchasing their first round of equipment to get out there and do those skilled trades, either with a company or on their own business. So we are making progress.
it's good. Building healthy communities. One of the focuses now of the Ontario Chamber of Commerce, as you mentioned, is mental health. What the Cambridge Chamber of Commerce is also doing is we're working diligently to build a toolkit for small businesses as well to be able to implement into their organization where they can identify issues of possibly mental health issues with their employees. But more importantly than that, is having the tools to be able to help that employee deal with their mental health issues. Because nothing is more unproductive than an employee dealing with issues outside of the workplace that are making them less productive. So we know we can help businesses be more productive by making sure that their employees are and living healthy, happy lives. What is the Ontario government's plan for dealing with, because we can draw a straight line between mental health and opioid addiction and homelessness and all of that stuff. So if we can do something about mental health, right at the root cause, you know, we can solve, not cure, but we can solve a lot of issues in our community. What's the provincial government doing?
Thank you. And we've been doing a tremendous amount. I was really glad to hear you say the root causes of mental health and addictions, because that was the work that the Waterloo Region Crime Prevention Council has been working on for the last 25, 30 years that they've been there, to identify some of those root causes and then be able to provide prevention techniques around that to try and avoid it later on. We know right now we're at a time that we're finally recognizing the number of people that have and struggle with mental health, not just individuals, but their families as well, that are trying to support them. And, stopping the stigma has been very helpful in bringing this forward, this problem forward. We already spend billions of dollars a year right now on supports for those suffering from mental health issues. And we have just passed the $2.1 billion investment as a boost for the next 4 years in the budget just this past week in order to support more individuals. That $2.1 billion investment includes a mental health worker in each and every of the 400 high schools around Ontario, and we're continuing to build out more programs that address the prevention part of it, as well as the treatment for mental health issues, as well as rapid access clinics and more supports for those that have now have addictions along with the mental health issues. So we're continuing to focus on this. Our poverty reduction strategy that we started 7-8 years ago is also addressing some of the root causes of mental health and issues and wrapping supports around those families, those single parents, more caregiver relief, more time off if somebody's struggling with as a caregiver for somebody in some kind of a crisis. So we've done more wraparound supports or supports on various different levels to do that. Prevention is key. I know we've been talking about the Iceland model, not only at the Crime Prevention Council, but other councils are picking up on the fact that, look, Greg, if we give our kids, young kids, interesting things to do each and every day, late into the evening if it's a teenager, with supports in place, we would go a long way to having the children supported if their families are unable to do it adequately, to identify issues early on, and also to have the care and treatment early on if we were able to provide those kinds of things. And we're continuing to, as I said, not just do a one-prong approach, but really a full-scale, let's look at this society and what else can we do here. I'm also a big believer that if we treated our children well, right from when they're in the womb to when they're born, and we treat each other kindly with respect, and we don't have the bullying either at the workplace, online, any of the social media stuff, we as a society would be much happier, and we would find that we have far fewer numbers of individuals suffering from mental health. To me, it's up to each individual. Look at your own life. Are you caring for people around you? Are you making sure that people feel respected and heard? Or are you, a boss or an employee or a parent or an individual who is causing angst with somebody else? We all have to look at ourselves and our own reaction. But in general, we are putting far more supports in place because that's what we're hearing, what we're needing. The sexual violence and the sexual harassment and violence action plan we've brought in also includes an action plan that each post-secondary education has to do every 3 years to upgrade it to prevent some of those issues. That in itself are all preventative measures to ensure that we can finally contain this epidemic of mental health issues, and to be able to make sure that people are then more productive, they're able to find the supports they need early on, and be more productive in their jobs each and every day.
Really an important issue,
It
and
is.
that's obviously why we're getting involved.
And
with it as well.
kudos to the Ontario Chamber for doing this. It's about time people recognize that those suffering from mental health issues are not productive at work. A lot of absenteeism and unproductivity. So it's incumbent on all of us to make sure they have the supports they need, so our business grows.
For sure. Improving government accountability. The Auditor General, Is she right, or is the government right?
So the Auditor General has been in an accounting dispute with the province of Ontario for the last couple of years. And she disagrees with some of our pensions and whether it's an asset or a liability. When we were talking about having third party looking in, our government went to all the other major accounting firms to look at the treatment of some of the issues that the Auditor General is having issues with, and it's only been the last couple of years, and they agree with the province. And she disagrees that the Fair Hydro Plan, with its $70 billion asset, should not be on the tax base rather than the ratepayers for the electricity system. So the other accounting firms also disagree with the Auditor General. This is a change from how she used to look at the treatments for our practices. And as I said, it's an ongoing accounting dispute and a disagreement with how she feels about that.
It's interesting because in my conversations around folks from the Auditor General's office as well as the accounting, the Auditor General is not saying what the province did was illegal. It is a legal way of showing it. What she's really saying is it's more appropriately shown on the overall debt of the province, because it is a debt to the taxpayers of the province. Yes, the asset is there. There's no question about it. But that debt is still a debt to the citizens or the taxpayers of the province of Ontario. And it shouldn't be shown on hydros, which is really now because of the quasi-public privatization of hydro. That's not as evident or as transparent. She clearly, their office tells me, she clearly is not saying it was an illegal allocation. It's not right. It should be more transparent and shown on the provincial books.
And yet all the other accounting firms, the KPMGs of the world and all the other major players across not just Ontario but Canada, we had weigh in, and they also disagree with the Auditor General.
Yeah, but they disagree only from the fact that they're interpreting, they're not disagreeing, they're saying that it is right. What the province did was perfectly legal. And the Auditor General is not saying it was illegal. She's saying, yeah, I recognize it's legal. It's just not appropriately shown. And that's really not in the privy of a private accounting firm to come out and say, well, is it right or is it wrong? No, what the government did was right. It's legal to do that. No problem. It's just it should be more transparent. From the Auditor General's perspective, it should be more transparent and out here in the public sphere. But,
and
you know,
again,
it's a
this
dispute.
is a change from her.
Yeah,
Because
exactly.
it was only until the last couple of years that she decided this way, and it's based on accounting practices that the other accounting companies are doing.
Completely legal.
We've been incredibly transparent. We brought the Transparency Act into Ontario when we passed that, and not with all party support. We've continued to work very closely with the Auditor General's office to continue to work on that. She agrees that our numbers right now are accurate and transparent, and that's what the other two parties have based their platforms on. She also agrees that our path back to balance is sound, and we've been using sound principles. As a matter of fact, she also agrees too that we have a balanced budget this year with a small surplus. It's only the 8th time since the 1970s that we've had a balanced budget here in Ontario under any government. And when I ask this trivia question, most people don't recognize that under the Conservatives that happened 3 times. Under our liberal government, we have balanced 5 times, and that's since the 1970s. So again, it's a disagreement with how it is placed here, but we also know that we are sound in our path back to balance, and that the other auditing companies or accounting companies, that we are on the right track with this piece. Why she changed her mind partway through her tenure, nobody's really aware of. But again, we are on firm footing right now in Ontario, and we're continuing to move ahead with a strong economy.
Good. 2 quick questions. do term limits make sense to you?
I wonder, this is a debate that many people have. I don't believe term limits would be
Yeah,
in
do they
everybody's
solve the
best
problem that everybody talks about?
I don't think so.
No.
It's not a term limit.
Because
you've
what if you
got
had a really good one in there?
And we have had
Yeah, exactly.
huge examples of, on any different government level, not just the
Exactly.
province, but
No.
on any given level. If you've got somebody that works hard in their community
And then they term out.
and they term out, then what?
I know.
And the alternative isn't always better. People sometimes want to change, but what are you changing to?
Yeah. Yeah.
And is that change to something going to be better?
Yeah.
We look back when we were talking about healthcare earlier.
Mm-hmm.
It's actually why I ran for government. I've been a long-term nurse in the community, and when I looked at successive governments cutting hospital beds, taking money out of the budget, taking 22% off our most vulnerable population in the social services world, closing hospitals. We lost almost 20,000 beds in the province of Ontario in the 1990s. As the baby boomers, and I'm one, you may or may not
Yeah,
be
I
one.
am.
Yeah, I know, that's a confession. As we're moving forward, we knew we'd be short of beds, doctors, hospitals in the meantime. That means really looking at long-term planning and making sure that we have what we need moving forward. And so if you've got a government that's doing well for the province, who's ensuring, or a politician that's ensuring that their community is looked after, that the issues of the day are taken to whatever, whether it's an opposition or a government that they belong to in the legislature, but that person's doing well for the community, then why would you change that just
know.
because it's a term limit? So I
Maybe
know
it's
we hear
just
about
a
this.
self-acknowledgement of your best before date.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah.
People need to recognize when they can't give anymore.
Yep.
And or don't give the value that people expect. But it's just interesting. Do you think, one last really quick question, do you think we have the technology today where any government, any level, can go out to the public and say, hey, what are your thoughts on this? And I know governments do that. They put out little blurbs every now and again, but in a more formal way. So let's suppose, a government can get elected with 38, 39% of the popular vote. But when they get elected, especially as a majority government, they answer to all voters. But do they really do that, or do they hear or listen primarily to their own base? If we could get, I think we're at the technology stage where government could set something up in a more formal way to say, here's our budget, Ontarians, here's what we're talking about. You like it, yes or no? And if you don't, what don't you like about it? And if you do, what do you like about it? Don't you think we're there now where government can be
We
like
have
that?
been, and it's interesting that you say that, because in this budget process where we did the pre-budget consultations, we've been online. We went to the people with the Common Ground platform, and from all Ontarians, we got hundreds of thousands of suggestions in on a very robust social media campaign and an online campaign from anybody. So the budget that we just passed here was based on the pre-budget consultations, all of the online submissions that we had, the letters that were sent, the emails, as well as the thousands and thousands of comments from all across Ontario on what they wanted to include. So it's already there. Part of it is making sure that everybody has the ability to get online to make those comments, because really, and that's where the world that we're in.
Absolutely, yeah.
Certainly here in Waterloo Region with the IT
Yeah.
corridor and the
Yeah,
high-tech
we're
corridor
okay with
between
it, but
Waterloo and Toronto, we are thriving in
Yep.
this way. Communitech, with 1,000 companies represented, are looking at this kind of thing. But certainly not all individuals are online, and that's why we have to sometimes do it the old school way
Yeah.
to accommodate those seniors or individuals
Yeah.
that are not online. But certainly we're already there, and
Yeah.
we're trying to just
I
advance
think
that
it'll
technology.
I think it'll get more formalized as time goes on and it
I agree.
becomes more widespread. But it's just interesting to me, and I think it can help government govern
And it does.
a lot better.
I can tell you, when I sat on the select committee for sexual violence and harassment across the province, it was a tripartite tri-party committee, and we had 1 year to travel the province and receive submissions on that issue. And I'm really just talking about the process. The outcome is going to drive us forward in our policy development for many years. But what's interesting is not just the 147 individuals and organizations that appeared at our table in a formal setting with all parties listening to their stories, but it was the hundreds of thousands of submissions that we had online from people that didn't want to come out, couldn't come out, or just really wanted to get their voice in. And each and every one of those communications was released in the formal submission and helped to guide and shape the final report of that committee. And that is an example where reaching out electronically to Ontarians really did work and shape that document.
Terrific, Kathryn. It's always wonderful to sit down and chat with you, but I want to give you an opportunity to chat directly to the constituents of your riding of Cambridge. So why don't you look at the camera and tell them why they should re-elect you?
And thank you for the opportunity for listening to me today. But I believe that I have done a good job for the citizens of Cambridge and North Dumfries. I've made sure that the hospital expansion is built and almost ready to open. I advocated to ensure that the Cambridge Hospital has another $1.9 million in its operating budget, and that we've continued to advance healthcare, the number of nurses and doctors that we have here, as well as a nurse practitioner-led clinic. I've continued to advocate in making sure that we have more investment in our area companies. $80 million has come into Cambridge in the last 4 years from the Southwestern Ontario Development Fund to make sure that we secure and add to our job count here. I continue to work very hard in your community. I come out to every event that I can. My constituency office is always open, and I continue to bring the voice of Ontario, or to Cambridge, to Ontario legislature in debates, in committee work, and again with my 2 ministries. So I believe that I have continued to work hard. I've been the best representative I can possibly be here. That's what you asked me to do. So thank you very much for your support in the past, and I look forward to your continuing support.
Well, there you've heard it. We hope these videos help you to make an informed decision on June the 7th. We encourage you to reach out, talk to the candidates, and ask the questions on the issues that affect you most. And please vote on June the 7th. I'm Greg DeRocher for the Cambridge Chamber of Commerce. Thanks for watching. Kathryn.